How are we doing, Ed?
Good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
good.
ready for action?
Just about. Yeah, I need to warm up. It's air conditioned to high heaven in here, but yeah,
Yeah.
all good.
I'm in a hotel room in Swindon because we've got a big interview with Innovate UK tomorrow for a major
Right.
piece of funding for a client,
Yeah.
and the aircon was at 17. So for the last hour, I've been getting colder and colder. I've now cranked it up to a balmy 20. So we'll see
Yeah. No,
where we go there.
I'll keep my opinions to myself then. No, it was definitely nowhere near 17, but yeah. And I
Yeah,
don't know why I'm complaining. It's baking outside, so I should be thankful.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so I think we should just get going now. So thank you, Ed, for coming on, and thank you, Shakespeare's, for being the headline sponsor for the Innovation Challenge. So Ed's actually Ed did a talk. I think you did the IP talk, didn't you? And the legals behind IP.
That's right.
And one of my clients was on the workshop and is already engaged with Ed to sort some potential licensing issues out and some infringement of that company's IP. So and that's exactly what these workshops are about. It's helping people move their companies forward. So hopefully that'll be good for everybody. So Ed, you're going to be talking about if you like the legals around licensing, confidentiality, heads of terms, heads of agreement, and all the rest of it, going all the way through. So Joe's going to be running the slides for you, and,
Okay.
I'll just be butting in as and when.
Okay. Absolutely fine. Okay, Joe. Let's advance forward. And again. So this is just an overview of what we'll address, as Sam has alluded to. So let's get cracking. Before any sort of, I suppose, intention exists to consider whether licensing your intellectual property is something you want to deal with, it's vitally important that, and I think Davies alluded to this, there has to be some confidentiality context applied to the discussions. And they're intended, obviously, to disclose to or cover to the extent that confidential information is disclosed, the fact that needs to remain secret. It shouldn't necessarily extend beyond that, and I have seen some that attempt to try and get into discussions about types of arrangements in connection with IP that maybe be contained within the confidential information, but that's not the purpose of a pre-contractual confidentiality agreement. The name is in the title. It's there to provide protection in the context of the discussions leading towards the potential of a contract being entered into, and that contract may in fact obviously be some form of IP license in some particular context. So it's vitally important whenever you're getting a confidentiality agreement in place to think about the permitted purpose for any particular disclosures or use of confidential information that's provided. And as I said, it's not and should never be used as or considered to be the vehicle by which IP is assigned or licensed. That is a separate document that follows on from those pre-contractual discussions to the extent they're successful, and that's the intention of the parties going forward. But it's also vitally important as well to consider what degree of disclosure is permitted and authorized, and that's both within the entity to whom you're making the disclosures, but also to connected third parties to an extent. Because there needs to be a need to know position that at the very least needs to be adopted, and in fact a carry forward of the confidentiality obligations, not only during the period of consideration of the information being disclosed, but also after the fact. They should have, for so long as the information remains confidential, they should still have contractual bearing.
And should that be like a 2-year period, 5-year, or what's kind of acceptable these days? Because I mean the world's moving so quickly.
It is, and it's very much dependent. And this is a fairly typical answer, I suppose, but it's very much dependent upon the value and the integrity and nature of information, and the extent to which I suppose it amounts to a trade secret. But put it this way: you can't have something enforceable that lasts for perpetuity. That just unfortunately at a contractual level is void and ineffective for uncertainty, because nothing lasts forever. So you've got to formulate an opinion of the value that attaches to the information, and then sort of put in place an appropriate period of time that reflects that value and sensitivity, and the degree of secrecy that you hope to obtain or maintain. Normally it's about 5 to 10 years, I would suggest, but you will inevitably have little caveats that lurk around within confidentiality agreements to suggest that, again, we're dealing here with confidential information, and if and to the extent they ever cease to be confidential, or they are already known to the recipient, or they're already in the public domain in some way, shape, or form, again, these confidentiality obligations don't apply. So it works both ways, and would always, I think, be well suited to some sort of reciprocal disclosure arrangement. Next slide, please. So once you've had the pre-contractual discussions, hopefully you're both quite committed to each other and feel there's value in continuing the relationship going forward and exploring what form that relationship is to take. And this is where, as Sam again alluded to, heads of terms, heads of agreement, letters of intent, memorandums of understanding come into play. And they effectively set out the key terms of a commercial transaction, which are agreed in principle. Again, to be flushed out in the actual fact by way of a fully fledged legally binding contract that is predicated upon and informed by those heads of terms. It's important to know that heads of terms, in the absence of anything stated to the contrary, heads of terms are non-binding. They have obviously evident serious intent between the parties and a degree of moral force, but they don't legally compel the parties to conclude the deal on the terms that are mapped out in the heads of terms, or even at all. There are some exceptions to that, and again, clearly within the context of a heads of terms arrangement, it's again vitally important to restate the confidentiality position. It can be appropriate to allocate costs between the two parties to get to the stage that's been reached. It might be important to put in some non-solicitation provisions, both in relation to employees and customers. It might even be appropriate to put in a binding position regarding exclusivity of negotiation period, all of which need underpinned by appropriate governing law and jurisdiction provisions. So there may be elements of an NDA, or sorry, a heads of terms that need to be expressed to be binding. But on the whole, the document is intended to be a non-binding, although morally sort of intendable document, as it were.
So if this was a licensing agreement, it might be, it might say, we want exclusive license worldwide, and we're going to pay you 2 million now and 4 million in 2 years' time, assuming that A, B, and C happens. What it doesn't do is go into some of the other nitty gritty.
Absolutely right, Sam. I mean, it is very much there for key commercial propositions and principles upon which the deal is fundamentally understood to exist between the two parties. So it's there to generate a degree of consensus so that the parties understand the framework, not the granular detail, but the framework of how they want to proceed going forward.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. So when we talk about commercialization or commercial exploitation in an IP sense, ultimately you're talking about one of two things. And in all likelihood, you're talking about one of them. But those two things are an IP assignment or an IP license. The distinction between the two is significant in that an IP assignment relinquishes your ownership of the IP in respect of which the assignment takes place. An IP license still allows you to retain ownership and control of the IP in question, but it confers a package of rights on the licensee in respect of the IP in question. So whenever it comes to any form of discussion about commercial exploitation, I mean, the key question is what rights attaching to the ownership of the IP in question are going to be assigned or licensed. And again, that's sort of, I suppose, the most significant of the two-pronged consideration. But actually, it shouldn't be underestimated as well what rights need to be reserved. Because ultimately, any form of license is a degree of rights sacrifice, and you need to understand what degree of rights reservations you require to engage in business as it exists, third-party relationships as they exist, or even potentially future plans. You also need to think again about, very significantly, about the scope of the license that's being afforded, not only at a geographic level, but also possibly at the level of field or purpose. Just by way of a sort of an example, if you're engaging with a license arrangement with a university, again, they will have particular purposes for which the information will be needed to be used, such as research and teaching. It shouldn't stray into areas of commercialization. But equally, if you have a piece of IP that is potentially adaptable to a number of different fields, again, your licensing arrangements with one particular commercial entity may simply be restricted to one of those fields to afford you, again, the ability to enter into arrangements with other parties for other fields. And again, another very significant consideration that should not be underestimated is this idea of improvement or development, particularly at the hands of a licensee. If you consider it from your own point of view, as a licensor and your ongoing research and development projects, there will inevitably be enhancements or advancements to the IP in question. And again, you need to consider whether they will form part of the license that's being afforded, or whether it's actually more beneficial to carve out certain types of developments that are actually revolutionary or groundbreaking, or showing adaptability to an entirely different potential market. But equally, you need to consider it as well in the hands of the licensee. And again, part of that is scoping out what they're allowed to do with it. But if and to the extent it could potentially involve some improvement development, you need to understand where ownership of that lies and resist heavily the licensee's attempts to try and claim that ownership.
We had exactly that with a deal we were working on, selling into a major cosmetics company, and it was a very novel mascara brush. But we did the license deal for both the IP for the mascara brush, off you go, but enhancements of that into other cosmetic products, because you could see how it could be equally applied with adaptation into other ones. So we made sure the deal covered the future use of that into slightly different fields within the cosmetic industry by that licensee.
Absolutely. And again, this is going back to the heads of terms position. This is the type of stuff I think that needs to be sort of envisaged in principle. Around there's some really important practicalities in terms of the ultimate license grant that's being afforded and rights reserved. Next slide, please, Joe.
Are you there, Joe? Next slide. Oh, here we go.
Sorry, Joe. Okay, I'll rattle through these reasonably quickly. It is the key element of any particular license, or the scope of any particular license, that you consider whether it's an exclusive license or otherwise. What I mean by exclusive, and what is understood commonly by exclusive worldwide, is that no person or company other than the licensee, to the exclusion of the licensor, can exploit the licensed IP in question during the license term. As I've indicated, in the context of scoping, that there may need to be some considerations around an exclusive license grant. For example, some existing relationships with third parties, or some particular needs that the licensor actually has, future plan-wise or otherwise, that needs to be carved out. So there can be sort of caveated exclusivity in terms of what's afforded. And again, that could be territorial as well, if it comes to that. But what the exclusive license grant mustn't do is effectively contravene things that already exist, or in fact, fundamental rights reservations that you as the licensor have. But ultimately, it is a sort of a cessation of control for the time being, and for that reason, you'll find that often in the context of an exclusive license grant, there are rights afforded to licensees to prosecute and defend potential infringements of the IP, and potentially even it could extend to contributing or actually paying entirely for their ongoing maintenance. Next slide, please. Sorry, Sam.
If the product you're licensing has got worldwide application, and the licensor has sacrificed an awful lot to get a lot of countries getting patent cover in a lot of countries, the ongoing cost of maintaining that database of patents can be huge, can't it?
Incredibly, yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
and so passing that on to the licensee as part of the deal is probably can be really quite an important step, can't it?
Very much so, Sam. Yeah, not in any way to be underestimated. I mean, there's a slide later on that I will gloss over, but that is essentially what it is covering. The costs themselves could be substantial, if and to the extent that the territory that's being afforded to the licensee in the context of the particular license in question covers some or all of that territory, then there should be some expectation of some contribution. The alternative, obviously, is a non-exclusive license position, and that's effectively granting a license that doesn't impinge at all upon the licensor's rights, except to the extent that the licensor, in respect of those rights and the relevant territory and the relevant term, can't then grant an exclusive license to anybody else. So they're at liberty to grant exactly the same package to any other party, and indeed exploit those rights themselves, but they just can't go that stage further once those rights have been relinquished on a non-exclusive basis. You need to think about something that it tends to crop up every now and then, which is this attempt by a licensee to try and introduce some sort of most favored nation position. And that's a position that effectively allows them to get the benefit of the most beneficial royalty arrangement possible, in contrast with and compared against any other arrangement that you enter into. So as you can see from a licensor's perspective, that may not be advisable at all, and I would suggest it's probably a default position to treat it as inadvisable. And you should look to refuse that clause, or at the very least qualify it with sort of substantiality or materiality qualifications, to say, look, you'll try and effectively address it with any other licensee on a substantially the same basis or materially the same basis, but ultimately you have freedom to deal with sort of commercial variations that get you into a possibly more advantageous position without blatantly cutting across or treading on the toes of the licensee. Next slide, please. Now, this is it's not a UK peculiarity, but it is not necessarily a worldwide position, and the concept doesn't actually exist in some jurisdictions. But a sole license is, and it's not even a middle ground, actually. It's just simply a license in respect of a given set of rights that simply affords the licensor and the licensee the continued ability to use them. So if, and to the extent that you're ever getting into this neck of the woods, then just be clear and probably state it specifically in the document itself, so that you don't inadvertently stray into an implied understanding that it's an exclusive position. Next slide, please. And this is what it's all about, really. It's the utilization of intangible assets for revenue generation. And that can be in your hands, or it can be in the hands of third parties and maximized as a result of that. But there are no particular laws that govern the structure of payment arrangements in the context of licensing, nor are there any particular regulatory approvals that are needed. And the tax implications attaching to any IP license aren't particularly concerned with how a license fee is charged or in fact paid. Which effectively means that the parties are free to agree the most appropriate structure for them at that given time. And again, that can take a number of different forms, some of which can occur in combination, such as a one-off upfront license fee with ongoing royalties going forward, which may be on a fixed periodic basis, or maybe simply predicated on a more regular basis than that, and associated in some way with turnover. You could equally have positions, if to the extent there's some R&D element or phased commercialization element, you could have staged milestone payments that act in tandem with royalty payments once the commercialization aspect of things commences.
So is that particularly important? So to stop people sitting on a piece of IP.
Yeah.
So you get your license it out, you think, great, we've got all this money coming in, and the licensee just then goes, I'm too busy, or the market's changed a bit, or this, that, or the other.
Quite possibly, Sam. It is there to fundamentally drive it. And again, depending on the type of license you're affording, that has to be critical, particularly if it's exclusive or sole, due to the degree of right sacrifice in those circumstances. So yeah, I think that's the primary motivation in many ways. And you could well include provisions for sort of fairly immediate clawback if they're sitting on it to that extent. But there's a very big point I want to make here, and that's this consideration of what royalties are calculated against. As Sam and I have talked about frequently, you have a situation where, certainly from a licensor's perspective, they should be arguing for it to be calculated against revenue generated from licensed products, and that's so a turnover position, as it were. The licensee will inevitably try and caveat that to some extent, or quite a big extent, by seeking to address it on the basis of profits made from the licensed products in question. And the profit distinction is one that therefore allows costs of supply, I suppose, and costs associated with the IP themselves, or costs associated with trade, whether that be sort of tax-based or customs and excise-based, to be deducted before royalties then got calculated on the remaining profit amount. All of that is arguable in context, and it depends on the bargaining positions of the parties and to some extent, I suppose, the nature of the license. I suppose where I would always argue that licensees should never be getting any benefit is where they're sort of agreeing on a case-by-case basis to some degree of discounting or some degree of allowance that's being afforded to their own customer base, as it were, because again, that's not something the licensor should be particularly held responsible for, I suppose, in the context of what royalties it receives back. So that's a really key consideration, just to make sure that the sum, in essence, that you're having royalties calculated against is as high as possible from a licensor's perspective. And sort of a pragmatic way of dealing with that perhaps would be assessing it on the basis of fixed amounts per article or weight of products sold, licensed products sold or produced. But as I said, there's a combination of a number of those things that could take place in a certain given format, and also considerations as to whether the licensor wants increased royalties once certain periods of time are met or certain amounts of revenue are generated. Equally, it could be that the licensee argues, that the relevance of the IP in question going forward should diminish, and therefore the royalties equally in terms of the rates that apply. So it's a full-on commercial discussion, back to the heads of terms, and try and get it nailed down there if you can.
Yeah. So we've only got 2 or 3 minutes left, Ed, I'm afraid.
No problem at all. No problem at all. Okay, so let's move on. Again, there could be other elements that you want to consider, particularly from an exclusive or sole license point of view, and that's this idea of a minimum return due to the degree of right sacrifice. So it could be that you need to stipulate minimum royalty levels or turnover levels that need to be received to justify that right sacrifice. It might also be that there's technical assistance or know-how to be supplied, actual physically supplied, and consultancy on that basis. So there could be service terms there, and always be aware, obviously, of making sure from a licensor perspective that you're getting what you require in terms of fees, and that those aren't, or you aren't, subject to the risk of foreign exchange rate fluctuation. Next slide, please. And tax, obviously, is a huge concern and factor to bring into play whenever you're assessing what it is you're looking for by way of royalties and how you want those received. There are all kinds of types of tax that could apply to a commercial trading arrangement. There are also, and this again is a sort of plug for our friends TBAT Innovation, you've got the ability also to potentially seek some reliefs, some tax reliefs that the patent box or R&D tax credits could also allow to take place. So it's something that needs to be, again, considered alongside the major commercial discussions, and advice certainly needs to be taken to inform adequately on those regards. Next slide, please. And again, if it's, and again, I don't know to what extent it's applicable to the audience today, but if there's a connected position, in other words, an intra-group arrangement when it comes to IP licensing, transfer pricing will need to be considered, so that the situation of a tax authority suggesting that an arm's length price isn't charged between two group entities and therefore is subject to some degree of adjustment, then gets factored into what then gets paid between the parties under the terms of the agreement. Next slide, please. And again, maintenance. This is what Sam and I were talking about earlier. It's vitally important to figure out where the responsibility for that lies. Normally, it would be the licensor, but again, depending on the arrangement, the licensee should take some of the burden. Next slide, please. Now, this is a risk position, and again, from a licensee's perspective, you would always want to seek something from a licensor as to what it is they're being given, and probably first and foremost, the fact that the licensor is in fact entitled and at liberty to grant the rights it's affording to the licensee, and that the licensee isn't, as a result of that, going to be stepping into an infringement arrangement. Up to the parties, obviously, to agree their nature and scope. As I said, a licensor should be able to warrant that it owns the IPR in question. Otherwise, it really brings to bear the question as to whether they have capacity to license at all. But equally, there should probably be non-infringement warranty sought, and possibly to an extent the validity and substantiation warranty as well, if and to the extent you're dealing with registered IP, perhaps. But from a licensor's perspective, there's only so much they can know in both those regards, and I would always advise that there's some degree of awareness applied to any warranties given around infringement, or the validity or subsistence of a piece of IP in a particular territory. Ultimately, even patents can be overturned for validity if someone argues vociferously enough. So it's not something you can fully commit to. Next slide, please. And then obviously, if you're seeking warranties, you also want to be seeking indemnities. But what I'm arguing here is that the position for indemnification is probably a more prevalent one for the licensor, because you're placing something in the hands of the licensees, and you are therefore placing it at risk. And if and to the extent there's a breach of the license terms, or there's something that's results from defective product or licensed product that's being produced in terms of injury or damage to consumer, again, you need to have an indemnified position as far as the licensor is concerned. Now that can be an open-ended, fully unlimited one, or it could be a limited one. Again, you're into the realms of bargaining power and negotiation to an extent. But from a licensee's perspective as well, I suppose you need to think about whether there's any resultant cause or fault at the hands of the licensor, and whether, again, this English law duty to mitigate loss at all times also needs to be applied. But it is a vital position for the licensor to include within a contract.
Yeah. So
Next
we've
slide, please.
got a quick question here, Ed, from the audience. Million dollar question. How do you value the royalty and/or the license fee? And
I genuinely don't have time. It's a full day talk, but it is. It can be market led. It can be led from the point of view of cost assessment in terms of getting you into a position of independently and separately acquiring access to or developing that IP yourself. It can be simply down to the degree of market advancement that it causes. And this is all about valuation in a sense, which my colleague Mukesh will talk about in a little while. But you've got to really determine what the value is to the the entity in question that's the ultimate licensee, and inevitably there's an element of the eye of the beholder in that situation. Yeah. But you can find an awful lot of market statistics in particular fields. Yeah. I think you then need to begin to argue uniqueness and again competitive advantage and cost saving to see if you can advance that further.
So that cost saving is quite interesting, because we're just working on a deal at the moment into it's med tech, and the company that's developed the tech has worked as a subcontract to loads of other med tech companies far higher up the chain, sort of the OEMs, and he knows just how much it would have cost them had they developed it internally.
Yeah,
he might have done it for a tenth of that cost, but he knows what it's worth to them, and
absolutely.
Also so that what they would have invested in it and the time scale. So our argument is, we know this is what you'd have invested, and we can actually get you to the front of the queue with the med tech. And if you were to start now, it would take you 4 years to get there with the loss of market. So we're bringing those arguments into it as well.
That's brilliant. If you can get that sort of empiric, objective evidence, that is fully substantiated in front of someone in the course of that sort of discussion, it can only serve you well.
Yeah.
I'll touch upon sub-licensing. Again, this is a sort of scoping exercise as such, but it may be that the head license, as it were, is there as a mechanism to allow further sub-licensing. Again, it's something for heads of terms discussion, and people need to go in with their eyes open, as do the licensees, from the point of view of whether actually the license that's entered into does give them that right, and also what degrees of what conditions need to be satisfied in the course of exercising that right. So again, the terms that get entered into must at least be consistent with the terms of the head license, as it were. And again, you obviously need to think about, if the head license terminates, what then happens to the sub-licenses. Logic would dictate they fall away, but there may be reasons to provide for that otherwise, if there's necessity with regards to the sub-licensed arrangement, and they can be conducted independently.
And would the licensor look to be sanctioning those sub-licenses, or will they have no control over it?
I would suggest that the best position is yes, get the ability to approve them. But again, that discussion may fall on deaf. Well, that discussion, it probably should generate something similar as to whether the licensor wants to be that officious or not. I don't know, or whether they feel comfortable just relying on this idea that actually, just so long as they're consistent and don't over-promise in a sense, or over-provide, or extend the degree of rights beyond that originally granted, then they feel comfortable enough. Yeah. Next slide, please, which should be the last, I think. And then again, it's a question of as well as sort of scoping out any given license, figuring out how long it should last. And again, to an extent, if it's IP registered IP that's at issue, there could be a very finite limited period of time that applies. And again, the degree of geographic application to that registration may again have a bearing. But equally, you need to think about what could cause that license to terminate earlier than perhaps the originally intended, or even the remaining duration of the IP in question, and that again, it's back to sort of standard termination rights for breach and insolvency. From a licensor's perspective, it could also include a challenge by the licensees to the validity of the IPR. And again, there may be reason to think about why the licensor might want to get out sooner rather than later, or at any time for that matter, if something's being granted on an evaluation or trial basis, or it's just not coming to fruition quickly enough in the context of commercialization. From a licensee's point of view, again, it could work either way, just depending on how long they want to have the ability to utilize the IP in question. But again, if there are circumstances in which the revenue that they have to provide back to the licensor is going to potentially increase to a non-sustainable level, they might want to get out before that. So
yeah,
again, lots of commercial discussions and lots of things to think about, which can make a weighty heads of terms, but it is important to do in the long run.
So that's. I think that might be your last slide.
I think it is. The last slide is
there we go.
Just some headlines to really think about.
Yeah. So I think so most of what we've got there ought to be, once you've got to the heads of terms, is that the very next stage, is to go through all this, and at the end of that you go, yes, we've still got a deal, now let's go fully legal.
Yes.
So that's the very next stage, is to thrash through all that. And what's superbly obvious to me is you can't do this on your own, because there are just so many pitfalls and things to consider, that at which point you've got some comfort that the money you invest in getting that professional help, you're going to realize the value of it, because you've done the heads of terms, or you've got to that stage. Once you've got this piece done, you know exactly what you're hoping to gain out of it, and then it's worth investing that money, because otherwise you could be in an absolute mess.
I can't stress that enough, Sam. I hope it's sort of semi-self-evident from what I've just suggested, that there are complexities, there are pitfalls, and plenty of them. But actually, it can be navigated reasonably smoothly and constructively and productively with the other party and their solicitors to get to a reasonable, even-handed, mutually beneficial conclusion.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be there to trip up. It should be there to protect interests and protect them adequately.
And to be fair, anybody sensible who you're licensing to will have exactly the same list of stuff that they know that you're going to be considering. It's that negotiation. So one final piece, and we have actually run 10 minutes late, so I do apologise, folks. If you were to do a deal with an American company, would you try and do that under UK law and hence use UK solicitors, or what happens if they say it must be done under US law? What? Just a bit of a heads up. Would you?
It's a bargaining power fight, but I would always try and argue stronger when I was dealing with someone who is dealing with English law predicated IP. So, to my mind, if it's founded on English law in terms of its origination and it's then sort of protection and ultimately exploitation, it should be predicated on that same legal jurisdiction.
Yeah.
If and to the extent you're placing it in the hands of a foreign entity, I don't think that is a big enough claim. But again, it depends on who you're getting as your licensee, I suppose.
Lovely. Ed, absolutely fascinating. I could talk around this subject all day long, because it's very dear to my heart, and I've helped a number of companies move that forward. But yeah, absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much, Ed.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, folks, next up we've got Dom from Bulb, who are the workshop sponsors this week. We've used Dom. Dom's been in and done some work with us as a company. Here's Dom. He's just putting his camera on.
Hi guys.
And it was an absolutely invaluable session that Dom ran with us, all about brand identity, messages, and all the rest of it. So Bulb are the boys to go to get this kind of advice, and their knowledge of getting the product. And although you're going to talk predominantly about software and apps and stuff, a lot of what you talk about is actually equally applicable to any product or service, isn't it? There's a direct read across. So if you want to share your slides, Dom, and get cracking, that will be terrific. So is half an hour about enough, do you reckon?
Yeah, I'll try squeeze it in, and I'm pretty sure it will touch half an hour, or in between 30 and 40 minutes. So
okay, yeah, perfect.
Let me just, my Teams window is being slow. Give me a second.
You're not running on an Apple, are you?
I am, yeah.
You trendy marketeers, you and web people.
Yeah, this is where trendy becomes detrimental.
Yeah. Although when I worked at GE on gas turbine development, the head of combustion always said he would never fly to the moon on a Windows operating system. So there we go. That, to be fair, that was back in the 90s.
Well,
I am that old.
But that perfectly segues into the title of the presentation, really, and liftoff.
So we can't see it at the moment.
Oh, can you not?
No.
Okay, give me a second. What can you see?
We can see your charming face, so that's good.
Oh, that's all you need, Sam.
So we can show it from our end, or
yeah, that would be. I don't know why it's not loading, but Joe, if you could possibly share my slides, and
here we
I'll
go.
prompt you on. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's all up on our screen, Dom.
Great. Yeah, it's just loading for me. Wonderful. Yeah. So, Joe, is there a slide before that? Thank you very much. Perfect. So, yeah, ironically, a few digital technical difficulties, and today we're going to be talking about launching your software, website, and app. And I think it nicely kind of flips the coin from a lot of the topics the other guys have been touching on today. You know, looking at getting to market and commercializing and protecting the intellectual property and the thing that you've created. You know, that great product or service or both that ultimately encapsulate your business. I'm kind of blessed with a big chunk of time now to talk about how you might present this to customers, users, online, clients, potential partners of your business, and really essentially take something that you have crafted and kind of worked very hard on and take it to the public eye. And as obviously entrepreneurs, business owners, there's a lot of kind of rush to get live, a kind of willingness to really launch, or maybe to neglect certain parts of digital. And this is kind of the realist's checklist on getting that live, because digital will be, or already is, somehow part of your business. Next slide, please, Joe. So very quickly, that's me there. I'm digital engagement manager at Bulb Studios, and I manage SEO, copywriting projects, digital marketing projects for all of our clients, and we are a digital product agency. And I'll touch on the word or the phrase digital product in a second, but our clients at Bulb do come in many shapes and sizes and many sectors with very different needs. But one thing they do have in common is that digital presence at the heart of their business. And I noticed, for example, Hugh's talk was talking kind of about the companies that have done something that little bit different, or the right time hit the market, and every single one of them with digital platforms. You know, this could be, you might not immediately think that digital is going to be part of the landscape of your business and how your business operates and interacts with customers, but I think everyone on this workshop today has you know, made something or selling something that can be made better with digital, and hopefully this kind of the tips in this workshop will help kind of demystify that. A market that's very like full of jargon and full of a lot of people selling a lot of services that aren't always as valuable as they make out. So if you could go to the next slide, please, Joe. This is kind of what we're all about. More clicks, more customers, more of a connection, just digital growth, digital tools that essentially help your business launch, or your business to grow. At Bulb, where we've got, you know, in-house designers, developers, marketers, researchers, strategists, and this kind of all folds into the process we have, which you can see on the next slide. Oh, actually, sorry, that won't be the next slide, but yeah, thank you, Joe. If you head on to the next one, I touch on really what a digital product is, because I keep kind of saying we're a digital product studio, we're a digital product this, digital product that. Really, it's a thing on the screen. So if you head to the next slide, Joe, that's all it is. I will refer to that throughout the presentation, but a digital product is a piece of software, a website, and an app that you use as a part of your business operations to generate revenue, to market yourself, to acquire new customers, new business. As many of you already know, a good digital product has the potential to change the trajectory of your business. It can sell your products for you. It can be an ambassador for you as well. Whilst you're asleep, it's that simple. It could be looked at by someone on the other side of the world, and you could be making sales or picking up leads through that channel. I'm going to approach this through a kind of generalist angle, because obviously you could work with an agency to get a website off the ground or a piece of software off the ground, or you could tackle the job internally. And there's also going to be varying levels of kind of importance of digital in your business. Your whole business could be an app that your entire offer orbits around, and obviously I don't need to tell you how getting your app technically, visually, and kind of experientially how important that is. But you might just be wanting a brochure type website that helps to kind of get you to market with an airtight offering and for you to be able to send around to people. But all of this kind of boils down to this idea of a digital product, something that's you can't hold in your hands, but it essentially is a tool that can be used in your business. Next screen, please. So this is kind of how we work. I mentioned earlier, we're a close-knit team, quite a team of specialists, but we kind of work to these three pillars. We start everything off with a discovery phase, getting under the skin of the business, clarifying goals, who's going to use your product, who's going to navigate different journeys throughout the website or the app, and essentially what sets your business apart. We then, as I said, have an in-house team to design and build your software, website, and app. And once it's built, it's time to launch. And obviously, once you launch, you've got to bring people to it. And when you bring people to it, you've got to continue to bring people to it, more people to it, analyze who these people are, who's buying, who's booking a call, then increase the amount of people coming. It's whilst you're running a business, these things can often fall to the wayside. And the kind of the ferocity of it, and the kind of the need to maintain the effort there is often it's not just it's silly for me to say that it's just overlooked, because it's not. It's tough to do that, especially if you're a startup or it's not necessarily in your field. But our process is kind of designed to support clients of multiple sizes, but also it is kind of geared around that startup mentality of having a kind of digital partner to just elevate your offering and constantly evolve to your business, what you're doing with your services and products as you start to grow and scale up.
And is there a sort of a feedback loop from engage back to discovery? So as you're learning new stuff, or you're monitoring how well your website or your app or your promotion's going, it drops back into discovery. Well, why is this not meeting our company objectives? Why is it doing ABC? How can we enhance it, then design? So it's a big old circle, I imagine.
Of course, yeah. I wish I'd have added a big old arrow that looped back around. But as designers, we should have considered that. But absolutely, and obviously, the kind of landscape we're at the minute, where it's that classic thing of all the kind of digital tools you use. If you're not paying for a product, if you're not paying to use something, you are the product, right? There's data being captured on you, and ultimately you being a user, your behavior is valuable to that business, whether it's Facebook or whether it's a piece of software like Teams. So on a smaller scale with your business, engaging, running an ad campaign, as Sam says, you can very easily take that data that you've gathered in that campaign and restart that process and say, right, we've learned a lot more about who's engaging with our business, who is clicking on an ad, who is kind of spending more time on our website than others, and then what does that tell us about where we're going strategically, and what does that say about which services are most popular, or ultimately what users think of our offering. So yeah, you're spot on. If we head to the next slide, we can kind of see what point of the journey we'll be looking at today. It's ultimately that kind of, sorry, just back one please, Joe. Yeah, those little arrows kind of pointing at the precipice between digital delivery and digital engagement. This is what we're looking at. It's probably the most exciting point for the client for when we're working on a project, and it's often stirs up those feelings of like, right, let's go, let's do it, let's just smash it, let's launch it, and let's go. Especially obviously any entrepreneurs or on the call right now will have that kind of right, move fast, break things kind of mentality. Of let's get it out. So this kind of next slide, Joe, if you're able to pop there, kind of embodies that. There's a lot of things, a lot of feelings that we all have when it comes to launching anything, whether it's digital or whether it's not, and it happens to everyone. And these are just a few quotes that we've heard from clients who might be in the more startup region, and it's not a bad thing. It's often how we kind of approach internal projects or processes. You want something done quickly, and it's a great thing to move quickly because that's how great things happen. But the part of this checklist that I've kind of put together seeks to address some of these sentiments. We build it, they'll come. That's not necessarily how it works on search engines or online. So if we head to the next slide, this is kind of the first answer to the idea of let's just get it out there. Cool, you jets. So if we head to the next slide, there's a bit more information on this, because ultimately first impressions are everything in digital. If you have a physical location, a physical shop, constantly the decor can change. If it's a restaurant, the menu can change. The signage can change, and it's an ever-evolving physical space that the experience is kind of dictated by many factors. But a lot of the time when you launch a digital product and you get it out to potential customers or existing clients, or if we're referring to Davies or Hughes presentations, taking it to investors or taking it to potential investors, that is, first impressions are everything. If you can not maybe wow someone on that first click, or if you have digital at the heart of your business, if there's an error message that pops up on that first experience, you might as well forget it, because if you're selling something digital or you're promoting services on a digital platform, you are what you present to those clients. A quick example is, I guess, say you have an app that connects local people to independent businesses in their area, right? And there's a consumer who, I like supporting local. I'm passionate about that, and I'm comfortable ordering online. So if I can order from a local business on my phone, that's going to make things way easier for me. They download the app, they create an account, they go through a lot of kind of steps to get to where they need to be, and they tap search for their area. There's an error message. Nothing comes up. The map's broken. The map shows that they're in London. If that's and they're in Stoke, say, what would you do? I guess as a user, that's enough for you to just go ahead and delete the app. If you hear someone mention that again, it's likely you won't ever re-download it. That's a customer gone. And maybe in a more physical space, or if you're dealing with in-person business, sales over the phone, you can kind of lead people in a certain direction, or show them the worth of an offer, and you know, it's more malleable. Whereas if someone is heading to your website or your app, it's totally down to the speed of the website, the design of the website, the functionality of it, and it's their experience to have. So if you head to the next slide, Joe.
So that's quite interesting, Dom, because in the workshop number 2, which was about product, one thing was sort of getting to the point of a minimum viable product, making sure you understand where you want to get to, say 18 months down the line, so with enhanced functionality, so you can launch and get that customer feedback, that engagement and the loop. But I think what you're saying is make sure that minimum viable product does do exactly what it says on the tin. You know, test, make sure it's as engaging as absolutely possible. It may not have all the end functionality, but it gets people using it and it doesn't fall apart in front of them.
Absolutely, yeah. As you said, the minimal viable product is incredibly important, and I guess it's different for the nature of different businesses, whether depending on who your audience is or who your audiences are, but ultimately it's about gathering feedback, but also kind of making sure the right people don't see it at the wrong time. So yeah, as Sam said, test is a big part of it. Often, if you work with an agency like Bull, for example, it's often part of the internal. It's part of the internal process. But testing on your side gives you the power to kind of make sure your vision is implemented. As directors or CEOs or whatever, you're going to have a clear vision in your head right away. And miscommunication between third parties or whatever will take place if you don't test yourself, if you don't kind of make sure that you review how the messaging is coming across or what images are used on the site, etc. When I say check with experts, it's kind of getting a second opinion from someone you trust. That's often what you were mentioning about getting customer feedback. You know, researching with family and friends, but also people within the industry that your customers lie in. If you're building it yourself, if you're kind of giving it a go, and you have an internal team or a team of freelancers that you work with, you can often become kind of trapped in a bit of an echo chamber of like, right, everyone thinks it's good, great, we're done. When in reality, and I'll touch on this later, but your product your digital product, your website, app, software is not for you. It's made by you for your customer or for your client. You can often fall into that demographic, but it's likely that you will behave differently to someone else. And finally, make a launch plan. So this is incredibly important and something that I'm sure comes up on if you Google how to launch a website, it will probably be right at the top with probably a link off to a thing that you can buy or something. But make a launch plan. It's not only comprised of what you want to achieve, but also what you're going to do after the launch. You know, that timeline for next phases, how that aligns with business strategy that you're kind of putting into place. And then also, if digital is at the center of your offer, if your offer is an app or is a digital service, what new features are you going to implement a year down the line, maybe even further along? When is that going to happen? How does it kind of fall into play of your user base and your internal resource as well? So if we head to the next slide, the kind of response to it seems fine to me is as I said, remember who your product's for. Starting a business or heading up a business, it's often best to trust your gut. and you'll all know that, but with a website or an app that customers will be using, you often need to get into someone else's shoes. So if the next slide could be shown, please. As I said, your digital product is not for you. You might find yourself kind of looking at it and thinking it's ready to go, but you can often go a little bit go a little bit blind. There's obviously, with everything, it's always great to get fresh eyes, and digital products, websites, apps are no different. If we head to the next slide, we can kind of look at how that kind of manifests, and there's a few keywords that can kind of be used to summarize how to get out of your kind of like tunnel vision, and maybe to and obviously not assuming that this is what everyone has, because often it's if you know the importance of digital, you're going to know all of this anyway. But this is the things that the hurdles that we see most when dealing with clients and startups in particular, or early stage businesses in particular. So those words that we kind of would seek to describe when it comes to kind of making sure you can get in someone else's shoes are clear, accessible, and then also, I guess, attainable could be that final word. So the clarity of the content on the website is often the most important thing to consider. Making sure those journeys that people go on throughout the product are logical. What do people? It's two questions: what do people want? How do they get there? If people want, or if you want your customers to purchase a range of socks, for example, that you've got on your site, and you know that when people land, a particular target demographic lands on the website, and they're going to want your blue woolen socks. How many clicks is it to get to that product page, or to get to a checkout? And what barriers kind of intersect that? What can get in the way? Because great, there's an opportunity to try get someone to sign up to a newsletter, or get someone to read about how you've just had your 15th year in business or something like that. But ultimately, if that's getting between the customer checking out, or maybe it's a potential client who wants to give you a call, clarity kind of goes a long way to removing that. So clarity in your copy, the words on the screen, clarity on the images, making sure all of those are set up correctly, and then the buttons that are kind of presented towards you. We have a client in the automotive space who we kind of helped bring car sales online for. All of their business was done offline, and they deal in luxury cars, so they kind of thought, well, people want to see the car, they want to walk around a lot, they want to go for a test drive. But what we kind of helped kind of clarify to them, or clarify to their customers, with that information can be often better translated through a screen in someone's own time. A salesman kind of nailing like bullet points of why they should buy that car is often, it can often go over people's heads when they're in person. But if they've got a clear space to view all the benefits of a product, crystal clear imagery, and very clear steps on what next to do, that can often be more impactful. So yeah, clarity. I spent a lot of time talking about clarity, and I've said it many times. We'll put that as the pinned word of the day. Accessibility is also huge. So you might not have kind of difficulties with your site, or with the movement of hands and fingers and whatever, but someone buying from you might, or someone dealing with your business might. Obviously, things like alt tags are spoken about a lot, ensuring that site readers can read out aloud what the content is on your site, making sure that the website or app is set up kind of accommodate audio-visual helpers like that. But there's also things such as usability on different devices. If someone exclusively uses an iPad to get around on the internet and you haven't tested it on an iPad, then how will you know that it's accessible to everyone? It's ultimately down to, you know, if you've got a pool of people that are going to deal with your business, and you inadvertently cut a third of those people out, then that's bad business, right? So you wouldn't want to do that in a kind of physical business space. So why do it online?
You know, with the checking of usability on different devices, is it? I've got no idea. I'm just making it up as I go along. Are there now virtual devices? So a piece of software that says, right, I'm going to pretend to be an Apple iPad, and then you can run it on that and see how it runs. Actually, I want to do this as a Samsung tablet or a Samsung phone. Or do you physically need to have those individual bits of kit to run it?
There's plenty of tech that will help you. I mean, there's loads of tools that I'm sure you could buy and invest in, but there's also, you know, plenty of real lo-fi ways. I mean, if you've got any web window up, and you kind of right click and click inspect, it will bring up a lot of fangled code on the right, but it will also give you your screen on the left, and you can pull and drag that screen to imitate a tablet size and a mobile size and a desktop size. That is quite, you know, I say lo-fi as if that's not digital and technological, but if you can kind of use that as your first port of call, and just make sure that, you know, margins are correct, there's not copy spilling off the edge of the screen, and the colors have not gone astray. That's the first step. If you're working with an agency, for example, obviously they'll have things in place, but yeah, if you're going at it alone, as you say, there's plenty of ways out there, and Google's always the best place to start. But yeah, also consider that inspect option on the right click. And I say here, make your goals easy. You know, you don't want to, that's not an internal mission. Don't say, I want to make one sale this year or whatever. But what I mean by that is that your goals should be easy to reach for customers or for users on the site or app. It's a very kind of like A-level business thing to say, but they've got to be realistic, got to be measurable, got to be segmented. So if you're saying we want this many people to go through this path of the website, we want to get them to the contact page, we want them to fill out a form, and we want them to book in a call. That's all of those things. Who do you want doing that, first of all? And then also, how many people do you want doing it? But you've got to look back and trace back the steps of being able to do that. So if you've got that contact page, how many clicks does it take for someone to do that? Is there the option to have, you know, and this isn't for every business, and if I'm honest, it's not for most businesses, but is there a chatbot function that you can have to kind of facilitate that, or is there a kind of sticky header that can be there the whole time that allows you to book in a call within a few clicks? It's about reducing clicks and catering essentially for a dwindling attention span that is prevalent in almost every industry when it comes to digital. You know, everyone's got less time and more options, so make those goals easy to reach. Next slide, please. I feel very feel like a politician saying that over and over again, but it's quite a nice privilege. So yeah, the third sentiment that we see often is, right, let's build our service. We spent a lot on the website. It looks great. It works great. It's fast. It's functional. Done. Digital doesn't necessarily work in the same way that, again, a physical business would, in a sense that if you don't cater to Google, if you don't try and please search engines and cater for what they see as a passable or desirable choice for their users, you will be buried on the 30th page, and no one's going to find your website unless you take them there. So if you could go to the next slide, it's ultimately a universal way of finding businesses to purchase from or to work with. Search engines are where most people start. If you're, it's not necessarily going to be for every business. For example, we have again, we have a client in the education sector, and we were working with them recently, and it's kind of clear that their website is merely a portal for students and teachers to access resources, and they are referred to that website from in-person events, classrooms, etc. They don't need SEO, but we have a client in the tourism sector who connects holiday cottages with tourists. If you were to look for if you were heading to Scotland on a break in a cottage in the Highlands, what would you do? You'd probably go and search cottages in the Highlands, holiday cottages, Scotland. And if you're not on that first page, how do you expect really anyone to get to your site? It's quite an extreme thing to say, but some clients should put everything into SEO and they put nothing because they assume people will get there eventually. That's not necessarily how it works. So for the next slide.
And again, Don, places like you can give them a heads up on the kind of budget that they might need to be spending if it's on pay-per-click. So there's some, no doubt you're going to come on about it, but there's SEO and your website, but there's also pay-per-click, isn't there? And are you going to come on to, you're talking about words now, so I'll shut up. But yeah, so it's kind of budgets for doing it, I'm thinking.
No, you make a clear distinction, because really this slide is geared towards organic SEO. And organic SEO is about naturally raising the rankings of Google and making your way up, so that you kind of compete with your competitors and with other people on the web doing the same thing or selling a similar thing to you. As you said, pay-per-click advertising is essentially paying for that express pass to be at the front of the queue, without necessarily putting that work in. You pay for the privilege of being at the top of that page for when someone searches. I guess they're very different things, because one is earning that reputation with Google, and one is saying, right, Google, I'm going to give you this, so get me to the top. I guess see it as like, if you go to the same nightclub over and over again, and you kind of get a relationship with the bouncer, there might be the opportunity to maybe like slowly get through the queue a bit quicker, or whatever. But if there's a certain an underhand rule of like pay me a £5 and you can get in quicker, then that might be the kind of the equivalent to pay-per-click advertising, because you're essentially going, I haven't earned this spot, but I am at the top and I'm easier to click. So consider that when you're looking at pay-per-click advertising. I will talk about that further down the line, and I think we're looking pretty good for time, so I'll be able to explore it a bit deeper. So yeah, 3 points. Get your tech right. That really just means if you're using third-party tech, if you've got payment portals to integrate, if you've got, I don't know, for example, I know Sam speaking to the team there, and as you mentioned, the workshops we've done with yourself, you have things like pricing calculators and funding call finders and things like that, which essentially allows you to kind of like bring people into the website due to a unique piece of tech that allows them to kind of fulfill a part of their search. And if those things don't necessarily work quite right, Google are going to flag that, and Google are going to see in the code your code's not quite right. We're not going to put you to the top of the list, because we don't necessarily trust that you're going to deliver an amazing experience to our users. So if you start viewing things through that lens, that's really the best way to go. If it's not quite right for users, that's one thing. But if if it just about works right, that's great, but Google are gonna see through it and maybe not penalize, but maybe not boost your business as it should be being boosted. So consider that, and any content you use, make sure it's light, agile, and clarity. Keywords, the next one. So keywords are obviously linked to the term for keywords is really the phrases that people search on search engines. Again, if you're looking to book a holiday away in Scotland, for example, you could use those 3 words, holiday cottages Scotland. There's probably going to be hundreds of websites that have that in their title, have that on their pages. How do you then find the best search for that you want to rank for, and kind of strategize towards getting on that ranking page? Ultimately, the answer is keyword research, but it goes a bit further beyond that. There's a lot of best practice that comes into to structuring your page and integrating those keyword phrases into the page and the metadata. I won't necessarily be able to dive deeper into that on this presentation, but it's important to understand the role that keywords play in how you structure your pages and essentially get them ready for search engines. And how you kind of find that and integrate that is it's a particular skill, and I'd be happy to obviously talk about that more with anyone on the call who wants to email me or message me on LinkedIn or whatever. But it's a whole world of its own, but it's something to consider to make sure that you're kind of ranking on search engines if that's something you need. Something else to consider, and I guess don't be dodgy is a bit of a reductive way to put it. But there's a lot of kind of dark tactics that are implemented when it comes to SEO. It's not as prevalent as it used to be, but back in the day, there'd be a lot of kind of, white text on white backgrounds that would say like all the keywords just spammed in 1,000 times, or maybe ads that kind of promise something that you can't necessarily deliver just to get that person on that website. And a third thing, link buying. So buying links that will essentially direct people to your website. They're all kind of, as I said, dying out a little bit, but it's important to note that any kind of SEO tactics that are kind of proposed to you, or something that you kind of stumble across that don't necessarily seem, I guess, kind of the main order of play, should be avoided, really, because Google, again, they're omnipresent. They can kind of immediately kind of figure out when someone's doing something they shouldn't be, and will penalize your website or your software for it. So for the next slide, it really just addresses that kind of sentiment of not bothering with data. Let's get it out there, and we'll look at Google Analytics 1 point. Data is king, really. I'm sure a lot of you know that already, but it's worth reiterating. If you head to the next slide, please, Joe. The one reason, or the primary reason to kind of use data or kind of integrate that as into your website, software, or app as much as you can is because you have it there just in case. It should be a strategic indicator. It should be showing you, right, so we're intending to grow at this rate, or we're intending to go down this direction with this audience. The way the tools available to you can essentially like accelerate that and pinpoint that and provide granular detail on whether you're achieving that or whether there's more to be achieved. At worst, it can act as a parachute. If something's going very wrong or not necessarily growing at the rate it should, then you can look back on it and fall back on it and understand why that's happening. So for the next slide, again, just 3 more points to consider. set everything up you can, all the Google properties that allows you, analytics, search console, tag manager. There's additional tracking tools. Hotjar, for example, if you kind of pay for the more premium plan, you can see exactly where people have hovered over their mouse, which buttons are clicked the most, which kind of parts of your website are kind of more popular, literally as a heat map, which is an incredibly invaluable tool, especially if you're dealing in e-commerce or in products that are being sold on your website. I'd say that reporting is ideal. So if you can check in regularly with key metrics that you've defined yourself, if you can set up kind of email reports that will head to your inbox every week, every month, it's just another facet of kind of, you know, checking yourself, understanding that things don't just kind of grow or go on forever without your input. It's important to check in, and then act on the findings. This is kind of, again, should be something that everyone's kind of seen before, heard before, but that data that's being presented to you is real people doing real things on your site. And if you can act on that, then that is essentially the same as customer service in any other industry or on any other channel.
One thing we've done before is done an email campaign, and then when we've had landing pages back at the website, we might have two different ones from two different emails gone out, so you can do A and B testing and see which one's getting the better response.
Absolutely, yeah. A/B testing is a huge part of that. I'm glad you picked up on it, Sam, because it's not in the text here, but that's probably one of the main tactics of figuring out which way to go. Again, a strategic indicator, understanding, right, we need to do this one thing. There's many ways to do it. Which is the best way to do it? Absolutely. So the final point on the checklist, if you can head to the next slide, please. You can kind of imagine, but it's worth celebrating launching a digital product. Once you've got a piece of software out there, a website out there, an app on the market, you can search it in and download it. That's a huge feat, and it's potentially a huge next chapter for your business. You know, it can open many doors, and as I've said before, it can sell your products for you. But what some might be in danger of doing is, I guess, breathing a sigh of relief and thinking, right, that's done. And it often shouldn't be regarded as just something on the side that was something we did in the past. So next slide, please.
So just got 2 or 3 minutes if we can, Dom.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's a living, breathing product. It's malleable, subject to evolution. They can age, they can break. So the 3 points on the next slide, please, really just summarize that from a marketing standpoint, really, because ultimately to keep a product healthy, you need to promote it, you need to nurture it. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I think it's jumped one more. Sorry, one more the other way.
There we go.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. So yeah, audit yourself, make sure you're kind of checking in on yourself, conducting surveys with users, running technical scans. There's plenty of things that will allow you to do that. Google Page Speed Insights, Ahrefs, for example. Keep an eye on competitors. And when you're running ads, or if you're running ads, again, I'd like to have touched on this a bit more, but make sure they're kind of fitted with a suitable research and recommendations. Spread your budget across long-term strategy. Make sure that you're monitoring and adapting your ads where possible, and ultimately aim for organic traffic. And me using that term, just in case anyone's not, I guess, can't make the distinction. Paid traffic is obviously from advertising. Organic traffic is someone who's getting there by themselves.
Yeah, I think that long-term, that ads long-term and getting your pay-per-click words right and the phraseology is such a minefield, because you think, yeah, that's a great one, we'll use that, but then it's just people just coming in, bouncing straight back out because it's just not what they're looking for. And it really is doing a full audit of what other practice, if you can find out what the people are using, putting your place in the feet of your customers, what might they actually search on, and then trying those and hone the AdWords so they do actually work for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And exactly the keywords and as you said, the phraseology of how people search for things, and you might think you've nailed it with something, and the people just hitting your page just aren't interacting with it, and without monitoring it and doing the same again but with learned insights, you're never going to kind of gain any momentum. We've just launched a new website, and we were I was doing the keyword research for it, and I thought I had a kind of perfect phrase for our design page. You know, I phrased it out as digital product design and thought, right, we're going to go for that ranking and try and get on that first page. I kind of, before we went forward with it, I did a few searches around it for it, and instead of digital product design to the masses, meaning the design of digital products, everyone meant it as product design, so designing furniture, ornaments or physical products digitally, and that's not what we're doing at all. We're designing digital products. So just the way that people phrase things can also ultimately jeopardize your strategy. But that long-term goal should be organic traffic. You know, people that you're not paying for them to be there, they're there on their own accord. That's obviously just good business, right? But it's also a long slog, and it's something that kind of is only done by constantly considering organic SEO, technical auditing, and intelligent marketing. I'll quickly run through the final couple slides. But these slides will obviously be sent to you, anyone on the call, so refer back to them. But thank you, Joe. So these are kind of the metrics for growth. If you can reach new people, stay healthy and relevant, and achieve business goals with your digital product, that's when you know it's doing something right. And on the next slide, you'll see kind of what those actions are that fall into the middle cracks of this Venn diagram here. So if you want to reach new people, whilst making sure your site is healthy and it's relevant, make sure you're doing your keyword research. Make sure you analyze how people behave on your site. Make sure that you kind of audit yourself and see, is this design right? Do we need to update? Is it looking a bit out of date? Are we kind of falling a bit behind our competitors? Similarly, obviously I won't go through them all. If you want to create relevant content but achieve business goals, you can go through your website yourself. You know, set up if you're an e-commerce site, set yourself up with a few 100% discount codes and just run a few transactions. See, is this checkout experience working how it was 6 months ago? Because it's ultimately as I said, a living, breathing product. Things can go wrong and you don't notice. Obviously, when you work with an agency or something, you can have support and maintenance, and you're working with people who do this every day. But if you're kind of manning it yourself, if you're kind of pushing forward on it with your own team, you've got to kind of keep an eye on things and keep an eye on competitors as well. So just as a final slide, I'm not going to run through it any further. Actually, sorry, second final slide. You're not getting rid of me that quickly, but this is a kind of template strategy for putting together kind of those marketing pushes and ways of kind of assessing your own digital product. You've got to link it to audience every time, and you've got to link it to the ways that you're reaching people, and ultimately what you want them to do when they hit the site. You please use that as there's a lot of words on that page, so please kind of refer back to it and use it as a strategy going forward. But if we head to the next slide, that kind of sums it all up. Use this kind of loose checklist as a kind of realistic look at what should be considered when launching your website, your app, or your software. keep all of that in mind, and then obviously the more kind of incremental tasks, kind of get on top of those technical aspects of things, and don't neglect, you know, how Google plays a part and how data can kind of help you out. But yeah, that's everything from me. Please get in touch through email, LinkedIn, whatever. Just on that final slide, please, Joe. And yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you, Sam and the team. It's been great.
Thank you, Dom. Thank you very much. Absolutely mountain of information there. Absolutely fascinating, and not just applicable for your product that you're trying to launch, but even if you're a service-based industry, just getting the right messages out to your audience to get them to know about you, getting the organic SEO correct as soon as you can, so you're actually getting that, because Google wants people to come to your site instead of that, as you say, slipping a fiver to the doorman. And some really useful checklists. Absolutely brilliant, Dom. Yeah, you deserve a little sit down now, I think, after that. So thanks for folks. We're just going to have a 3-minute break. I want to get going for 3:45. Got some fascinating talks coming up. We've got Liam from or talking about PR. So we've talked about what you can do about getting your website noticed. Liam's going to be talking about the power of PR and getting you noticed and ways to achieve that. We've got Srijan talking about his experience of the challenge last year and what he's achieved since that, which is absolutely brilliant stuff, and what he's achieved is superb. And then Mukesh talking about how do we value what it is that you're trying to sell or license. So really, really great. Last three speakers coming up. Let's get back in just under 5 minutes. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you in a few ticks. Right. Good afternoon again, everybody. Trying to get the pace up now. So I do believe we are, just check my timing document. Yes. So we've got Liam O'Neill from Red Marlin. I've known Liam for a few years now and doing some fantastic work, I think predominantly in the automotive sector, isn't it, Liam?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but Liam's got a wealth of experience in PR. So, as I said earlier, Dom's spoken about your digital presence and driving people to understand what it is that you're selling and perhaps use the platform you've created. Whereas I wanted Liam to talk about sort of the PR side. So, what you can pay for, what you might be able to get for free, what you can sort out yourself, but it's actually getting your story out there and getting people interested in your product, service, and company. So Liam, over to you.
Thanks very much. Also, I just noticed my camera was a bit jittery, so if my internet signal's bad, just shout, Sam, and I'll turn my camera off just in case. So
looking very handsome. So
and it's a great, very, very typical Sam shirt you're wearing as well. So I like that one. It's very nice.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bear with me. Right, can you all see my screen? Good.
Yep.
Okie dokie. So first things first, yeah, it's quite a hard gig I've got here today because I've not got a pot of money to give anyone. I can't tell you about your IP, and I'm here to talk about PR, which is most people go, isn't that flower arranging, or what we saw on Absolutely Fabulous, and you just drink champagne and smoke cigarettes all day. Now, unfortunately, it isn't that bit, or at least the Absolutely Fabulous part of it anyway. But what we're here to talk about. So over the next 15-20 minutes, hope to provide you guys with the following. So a brief introduction to PR. What is it? No buzzwords, and hopefully that death by PowerPoint. Although I think that last one I've kind of failed at due to my current family circumstance. It was 50-50 whether I was going to be giving this talk today. So I've done a presentation full of words that will probably give Davies a heart attack just in case another colleague had to stand in. So I'll try and keep it brief, but basically give you guys the useful hints and tips on how the basic principles of PR work, and also an understanding of why it's important to your business. There is actually so much more to it than just the flower arranging and the drinking champagne sort of image that it might have, but it's integral to your business plan, and also give you the confidence to give it a go yourself. If you haven't got the budgets necessary, or a small business, there are things that you can do, and this is a very high level sort of introduction to it, but hopefully it'll give you the confidence to go away and be able to give it a go yourself. So here's the sales pitch. Who am I? Who's Red Marlin? So I'm the commercial director of Red Marlin. My background, though, I started out as a journalist. So I worked for a national newspaper. So I sat on the other side of the fence, shall we say, and dealt with PRs on a daily basis. So I understand how journalists work. And ultimately, if you look at the art of selling an editorial coverage from PR, got a sort of a 360 view on what that looks like. In terms of Red Marlin, as Sam was saying, so we're one of the sort of global leading communications agency. We specialise in the automotive and technology sector. So as you'd expect, we work with some of the biggest and well-established names in the business, as well as technology startups as well. Here's just a quick overview of some of the brands that we've worked with over the years. So what is PR then? So I hadn't actually done this before, but I went on to Wikipedia of all things and got a definition of what it is. Let me just read this one out to you. So public relations is the practice of managing and disseminating information from an individual or an organization, such as a business, government agency, not-for-profit organization, to the public in order to influence their perception. There you go. Now you know.
There you go. Yeah.
Now you see, I've got absolutely no idea what that means either, Sam. So what I've done is just pull together what my definition of it is. So public relations is the practice of protecting and promoting a person or a company or a brand's reputation. That's it. It's done mainly through earned channels rather than paid for. So Don was talking about it in the previous chat as well, the difference between paid for and earned. So PR is nearly almost predominantly earned channels as well, rather than the paid for. It always makes me laugh when we see some of our competitor PR agencies and they do the pay-per-click ads when you put in automotive PR company or something into Google. One of the things we're meant to be doing for our clients is actually meaning that they don't have to do that, and then you've got the agencies who are actually doing that to promote their own businesses, which is always quite amusing. So in terms of how does that differentiate between marketing, advertising, and branding. Oh, I'm getting a bit of feedback. Are we all on mute? There we go. So just as a rough sort of top line level of what the background of it, what the difference is. So marketing. So the gentleman with the tie on, he is the company, right? And this is him telling his target audience or his consumer, who's the lady on the right, that he is very good. They're a really good company. The advertising is that company telling their consumer over and over again that they are really good. They are very, very good. And they'll keep relaying that message over and over again. The public relations side of things, which is down the bottom left-hand side, so that lady on the left-hand side, that is a third party telling their customer, trust me, this company, they're really, really good. And branding is when your customer ultimately understands that you guys are really good and can relay that back to the business itself. So public relations is more around that third party being able to relay messages and be a more trusted source to your potential customer. So how do I use it? So to increase brand awareness and brand consideration. So the brand awareness is making sure that the right audiences, the right people within your target audience know who your company is. They're aware of you. There's no point in them knowing about you unless they actually do something about it. So that's where that brand consideration comes in as well. So it's educating your target audience to actually firstly know who you are and then actually do something about it, want to engage with you. There's no point in, there's no point in knowing about a Ford Fiesta if you're going via Volkswagen Polo. They've got to actually be able to do something with that information. So what does it do and what can it do? So I use it with my clients to help build interest with their target customers and audiences. So that might be the actual end consumer, that might be investors, that might be a number of people, potential partners. So that creates trust and validation. So we have one client who came to us and all they needed to get the next round of funding was to be able to say, as seen in the Times and a couple of other publications as well. That's all they needed. So we did a very short 3-month project for them to get them the coverage that they needed so that they could legitimately say that as seen in the Times and the Daily Mail and some of the other publications that they wanted to be seen in. Also use it to help secure funding and investment as well, drive increased valuations on the business, develop new business pipeline, and also help build that brand identity. So where to start? So like all things in business, having a solid strategy with a plan to implement is key to successful corporate communications. There's probably a lot more to it that we can try and get in this short talk I've got, but sort of the high level things to, as a minimum, to look to include in your strategy. So what are the key messages? And we'll come on in the next couple of slides of how to actually how to identify some of these. So what are your key corporate and also your product key messages and proof points? Who's your target audience? So who do you want to talk to and why? And then understand where their target media outlets or the channels are. Where are your target audiences? What are they reading and how are they going to consume this news? Social media strategy or approach, if relevant, and the power of things like LinkedIn should never be underestimated, or Facebook if it's right for your business, or it might even be TikTok, or it might even be, Twitter or Instagram. It all depends on a case-by-case basis. Integrated campaigns, and then also a calendarized plan for implementation with also product launches as well. There's no point in having any of this if there's not a tactical plan to actually deliver it all. And then identify budgets needed. Now, don't get worried by this one. It doesn't have to be expensive by any means at all. So ultimately, yes, your strategy should help that you communicate with the right audiences for your brand or your business at the right time. So let's look at defining key messages. So whether you're either creating your communication strategy, you're launching your product, or whether you're even preparing for a media interview or something else like that. So some top tips here of how to define key messages. So firstly, they should be bite-sized. Bite-sized information that you want your audience to hear, understand, and also remember. There's no point in sort of blinding them with science and they don't remember anything that you're talking about. So to that point, limit it to no more than sort of 3 key messages that are no more than 3 sentences long. Identify your benefits rather than just your features. And also, finally, they should be really easy to prove as well. So no marketing bullshit here. There's nothing which says we are the best company if you can't actually back it up. If you've got a, if you've got a Liam Limited, which is the best company as voted for by X number of people, and you can back it up with some form of research, absolutely fine. But just don't pluck out opinion pieces because they won't wash in terms of PR. So identifying target media. So the press will probably be key to success of your PR strategy. So it's vital that you understand the right media who's writing for your before even writing your press releases. So understand the press is what I would do. So sorry, that's the dog barking in the background. So being more targeted rather than just doing a machine gun fire out to every journalist or every publication that will give you far better chances. Part of my job when I was at the Express was literally to sit on the news desk in the morning and go through every press release that came in. And I kid you not, there was about 150, 180 that would come in each day, each morning. There is no way that one or two people, which is what it is on news desks at the moment, because they've got even smaller, can go through every single press release. So there's just no way. So what they'll look for is the ones that stand out within the first headline, your first bullet points, and also your sorry, I'm just going to go and shut my window. Bear with 1 second. Sorry about that.
I was doing a podcast with somebody earlier in the week, and partway through there was the sound of half a dozen seagulls on the podcast, and the guy, like we had a bit of a laugh, and the guy said that's going to make a great outtake from the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's putting me off anyway, so I thought I'd close the windows. So yeah, being targeted of your press rather than machine gun fire approach will mean you have far better chances. You must understand who your audience is. So this is actually a theme that's come across all of the talks I've noticed today. Understand who your audience is, right? So is it a direct client? Is it your client's client? Is it the end user? They might not all be the same, but think where they consume news, understand your product, understand your audience. So it might not just be something like your national newspapers. It might be really, really niche magazines that have a really, really fine targeted audience that read it. But if that's gonna work for what your business is trying to achieve, absolutely go for it. Again, it could be
and on those, trying to identify the right sort of magazines or newspapers to try and get your messages across to. Is there a way to find out what their circulation is? And so there's the, if you like, how many do they print? But then there's how many people actually get to read it. There's two different numbers, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. So every single publication will have a media pack. Basically, it's all pulled together by their advertising department, and that will have all the demographics, all the circulation figures, all of those things in there. In terms of how it works, the business to business press, made up stat, but probably around 80% is all pay to play. So they will want something in terms of how they're a business themselves, and in terms of everyone else's advertising budgets are getting smaller. So you'll normally need to look at supporting them in some way, whether that's an advert, whether that's sponsoring a podcast or something, and then they'll give you the editorial in exchange. It's not the case with every business publication, but some of them. The national daily newspapers, so the Suns, your Daily Mails, your Expresses, those sorts of things, they won't. They will just take editorial stories. So that would be based on firstly having a really good relationship, which is where working with a good PR agency can help you. But writing a really strong press release, if you can do it, they'll take it from there, because they don't have to pay a freelancer for it. So you're ultimately giving them their stories that will bring traffic to their websites, traffic to their, buying their newspapers. So it works both ways. So in terms of writing a press release, so if you're looking at getting media coverage for your business, so being able to write an effective press release is probably one of the easiest ways of doing it. But remember the following sort of golden rules when writing a press release. Otherwise, it will be ignored, and you, like a lot of companies, will be left wondering why. First and foremost, it's got to be timely and newsworthy as well. So timing is massively key. Look what else is happening within the wider media agenda that day. Read again, go back into the audience. Read that paper. Read the magazine. See what they are also covering that week. Be concise and to the point. Avoid long rambling marketing content. So remember, it's news. It's not an advert. Again, understand the journalist job. So a journalist job is, put simply, is to provide content for their customers. So their customers are their readers. So if you take the Daily Mail, for example, which is probably not relevant for most of us here, but if you take the Daily Mail, for example, they have got to provide content to their website, or the Mail Online, to their website that is going to be of interest to their customer, which is their readership base. It's exactly the same for, energy engineering or any of the specific bespoke technology magazines that are out there as well. So understand the audience, the journalist job, and if you can make their job easier, they'll probably run your story for you. Next one, this is really important. This is the beautiful truth in life, right? Will anyone care? Now, unfortunately, not many people, outside of your business, when they're all busy doing their stuff, do always care necessarily about your business. You've got to make sure that they do care. You've got to be able to write a piece of content. If you're writing a press release and it's got the company name mentioned 5 times in the first paragraph, journalist is not going to be interested at all, because they know you're trying to use them to promote your business for free. It's not going to be of interest to them. So that final point, it's a press release. It's not a feature. They are official announcements regarding something that's new or significant about your business or product, and how these will benefit the industry, and also, wider elements out there as well. So a few things just to include: catchy headline. So as mentioned before, journalists receive hundreds of releases each day. Make sure yours is relevant and gets to the top of their pile. I always like to include 3 summary bullet points at the top, summarizing the story. Most journalists, it's a bit like if you've ever received hundreds of CVs and for a job advert and you've got to go through it, right? You probably read the first sentence of the first paragraph. It's much the same with a press release. Summarize your story in 3 bullet points. Most journalists, if they get past those 3 bullet points, you've already got their attention. And then summarize the news hook in the first paragraph. And finally, this is something that a lot of people don't necessarily get right as well, is use quotes, but use them correctly. So use them to provide opinion or thought leadership, rather than information that's already in the body of the release. And, if we're talking around a new partnership announcement, and I see another quote in a press release that says "we are pleased," of course you're going to be pleased. You've just signed a multi-million-pound deal. So think of something about why it's actually going to benefit the wider industry and what the benefits are, rather than the fact that you're pleased. So selling and distributing, there's no point in having the best press release if no one's going to see it. So you need to understand how to sell it in. And again, remember, journalists need your stories in order to fill their pages. So, and if they can do it by receiving a press release they don't have to pay for, again, it's a win-win situation. So ideally, you'd have a PR agency with a black book of contacts who's speaking to a number of journalists on a weekly basis about many different clients. But in the absence of this, there are some things that you can do. In turn, most national newspapers, for example, will hold editorial meetings every morning around 8 o'clock in the morning. So make sure you've got your press release done before that. So most of my press releases will go to journalists sort of just after 5 a.m. in the morning, so that when they get to their news desks in the morning, they are able to go to their meeting with their editors and say, right, I've got the story for you this morning. If it's a trade publication, again, within or a business magazine, within that media pack we discussed, Sam, you'll be able to find normally when the deadline dates are, so you can have it to them well in advance for that. If it's a weekly magazine, again, there will be a set day of when it goes to print, or when they close it. So just make sure that you get stuff to the journalists when they need it by. As a general rule of thumb, avoid Mondays. Most people are catching up on emails or recovering from a hangover from the weekend. So
just thinking of that sort of emailing in, is it a case that you're saying kind of 5 o'clock, but you won't do it the night before? Would that sort of go to the bottom of the queue? So you want to have it some, I don't know how they actually operate the list, but if you've come in at 5, you know, it's before they start looking at, they might be looking at them from 7, ready for the meeting at 8.
Yeah.
So the 5:01's, 5 o'clockers are going to be at kind of the top of the list.
Yeah.
Whereas if you sent it the night before, they might be lower down the list, so they may not even get that far.
Absolutely. I mean,
So
if
it's
you
all
think about
tactics, isn't it?
Yeah, and if you think about the general behaviour of how people work, so I could send you a press release at 9 o'clock at night for the next day. If I've just left the office after a really busy day at 7 p.m, I've got to get home. I've probably missed putting the kids to bed. I've got to make dinner. If an email comes in, I'm not going to read it. But if it comes in at 5 a.m. in the morning and I'm getting on the train ready for work or the tube, or I'm going to catch the bus, or if I'm just getting up and before I jump in the shower, I will go through my emails in the morning, and journalists are much the same. They'll see what's come in. So that's a blanket term, that doesn't necessarily fit for everyone, but as a general rule of thumb, it's something to be mindful of. The other thing as well is if you've got a massive bit of news, that's really important. There are always embargoes that you can negotiate with journalists. So an embargo is a legal agreement that you've got with a journalist that you can share with them, news of a big announcement, whether you're just signing a new JV or whatever you're doing, where you can actually share the story with them, and then they will run it at that set time on that date, and it's a really useful way of sort of almost guaranteeing a bit of coverage as well. So general rule of thumb, as I said, avoid the Mondays and Fridays as well, unless you're targeting a Sunday supplement. The Sunday supplements are normally done on a Friday. Be aware of school holidays as well. Everyone's working remotely now. And in the absence, we've spoken about relationships and understanding, sort of a black book of contacts. But in the absence of that, a newswire service should be utilised. So newswire service. So there's multiple ways journalists can get their stories. So number one, from contacts. Number two, from something called a newswire service. Now there's a few out there, but there's sort of one or two main ones. Now what they are is they hold a database of all the journalists. You will pay to put your press release on there, and then it will get emailed out to all of the key news desks, sort of within the UK or even globally or Europe based, wherever you want to target it. So newswire service is really important. They are fair. They can be expensive. Some of them about 450 quid they start from. Some of them are a little bit cheaper in terms of, but if you don't have that database, it will put your story sort of in the eyes of the journalist. But again, if it's not written properly, they're not going to look at it. But a newswire service could be
Will a
utilised.
newswire service give you feedback on what you've written?
Rarely.
Okay, they just take the money.
Yeah. No, well, yeah. Basically, they'll rarely give you feedback on it. A PR agency would write it differently and also be able to get that feedback from the journalist. But no, they rarely give you any feedback on it. So also for the business-to-business publication, something else you can do as well is align with those forward features. So as part of that media advertising pack we spoke about, normally for the entire year, the magazines will have already mapped out what features they've got going in which month. So for example, if you're a company that deals with motors and inverters for electric vehicles and you pick up Professional Engineering magazine, you'll see that right in June, July, and also December, they've got a feature on motors. So and it'll also tell you the deadline as well, which is usually a month or two before. So that you'll be able to target that journalist and say, right, are you short of any stories? I'd love to send you some bits, and they normally accept it as well. So, and finally, we've mentioned this before as well, but just make sure your story is relevant for the journalist, the publication, their readership as well.
Yeah.
Media interviews. So just very quickly, if you've off the back of a successful press release, or sort of you might be asked to do an interview. So whether it's over email, whether it's a live broadcast, or whether it's over the phone, there's just a few things just to help you prep for that media interview. So again, first and foremost, make sure you know your business inside out, something we've heard before, but if possible, get those questions beforehand, so that you can prep. In the sort of last decade or so of doing this, I've never known of a journalist not to provide the questions unless they've got something to hide or they want to catch you out. If a journalist can help you prep, it means their story is going to be better, so they shouldn't want to catch you out. And if they don't give you the questions and you're not comfortable, don't agree to do the interview. It's very simple. You don't have to feel pressured to do these things, but stick to those 3 key messages. These become your talking points. So even if it goes off topic and we start talking about different things that you don't necessarily want to talk about, you can always bring it back to those three key points. Research the journalist well before the interview as well. Understand what their interview style is, and if it does go off track as well, and they ask you a question you don't want to answer or you can't answer. Normally, the questions you can't answer is about commercial sensitivity. Most journalists will understand that you can't talk about that sort of stuff, but never refuse to answer a question. Sort of you're not knowing that business. Always just go back and say, obviously I can't explain that for commercial sensitivity reasons, but what I can tell you is X, Y, and Z. And they'll nearly always be happy with that. They might want to push you, but just be prepared of the things you can talk about and things you can't talk about. There's been quite a few a lot of CEOs have been caught out that way by revealing commercially sensitive details about a new JV long before they've even even set off, and it's not a good way to start it. And finally, never ask for sign off for any copy. So when you go and do an editorial interview, that's the journalist's prerogative to write what they want to write, and you'll probably be quite bluntly told to go away if you ask them for approval. But what you can do is you can ask them to offer fact checking. So just say, if you'd like us to fact check some things, by all means, then they're normally happy to send things over there, especially if it's technical. So summary slide. So overall, just remember, a solid communications strategy should be an integral part of your business plan. If used correctly, it can help raise your brand awareness, your brand consideration. Doesn't have to be expensive or cost anything if you don't want it to, apart from your time. When writing your press releases, make sure that your story is newsworthy and relevant. Understand your audience, and also finally as well, before doing any of this stuff, I strongly suggest you get yourself onto a newswire service. You can drop me an email on the next slide of my details, but I'll happily suggest you a couple of newswire services. They're normally free to go and register, so you can receive all of the press releases that your competitors might be putting out, or go and sort of reverse engineer it. Go and look at your magazines, your target magazines, find a story from a competitor, and then go backwards, go onto the competitor website, find the press release that story would have originated from, and see how they've done it. That's something which is really nice to do before you sort of commit to doing any of this stuff yourself. Yeah. And finally, there's an embarrassing photo of me with my email address.
Well, Liam, again, a roller coaster of a presentation, and I think there's so many nuggets of information in there and hints and tips. And as you say, it doesn't need to cost you a fortune to get some of that PR and actually start getting your message out there. Absolutely fascinating. I used to have my own business, and I used to save up money and put a tiny little advert in is a motorbike security product in the bar, and I wonder why the phone never rang, because it'd be in there once every 3 months, and people would see it and then expect to see it the next month. But once I rang the editor and had a chat with them, can I put one of my products in as a prize? All of a sudden, I got a free editorial and all the rest of it, and they were actually interested in the story about where I'd come from. And it's that strategy, isn't it? And understanding who your audience is, and as you say, working with the journalist to try and get that placement, that all important placement.
Absolutely.
But, okay, Liam, thank you so much. That's been absolutely fascinating.
Cheers, thank you.
And best of luck in the coming days, by the way.
Thanks. Cheers. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to rattle straight on. So Srijan, if hopefully you're there. Okay, everybody. So last year when we ran our inaugural innovation challenge, I think we had we ran the 4 workshops, and we had 50 people, 50 companies compete in the competition, and then at the showcase we narrowed it down to 10. All got to do a 2-minute pitch in front of an audience at that time of about 120, of which there are about 30 odd investors in there, but then support networks. And we were delighted when on the back of the business plan, Fenu Test came out on top. So welcome, Srijan. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Nav, for this very generous introduction.
So first of all, Srijan, would you like to just sort of run through what your product is and what it is you're trying to achieve, and then we can start exploring some questions on the back of that.
Sure. So I'll just start by giving introduction who I am, even though it's all mentioned on the slide, but please hear my voice. So I'm the co-founder and chief scientific officer at Finutest Diagnostics. We are building a UTI diagnostic kit, which will be available at the point of care testing. It will provide precise, accurate UST diagnostics at a very cheap rate. So our plan is to currently take the system, which gives you the diagnostic for UTI, which is urinary tract infection, in case anyone doesn't know. About 2 to 4 days, give the sample to the GP, it goes to the pathology, it comes back, and you receive a couple of lines of antibiotics, often wrong. Statistics says over 50% of the time. Our idea is to replace all of the system, put a point of care diagnostic kit in the GP surgery, walk-in centers, pathologies, pharmacies, care homes. You give the sample, you get to know if you have a UTI within 10 minutes and the correct antibiotic that would be prescribed for it within the next 50 minutes. So all bundled up in the time span of 1 hour. And yeah, we're looking very promising at this point. We've done some external studies and we have come up with about 95% accuracy, which looks great. So we're just at the point of translating the biology into technology. So maybe 1 year from where some of the technologies out here are. Said that, we're a very young company, 2 years into operation, but the technology has been developed over about 6.5 years, started with the start of my PhD. So it has been a while since I've been involved in this technology.
Yeah. And so have you raised money to sort of move the company forward? Because obviously you can't just fund it all by yourself or as a spin out of a university. So do you want to just go through your journey of raising money and then where you are with facilities and staff levels now?
Absolutely. So we started, so Finutest kicked off with the Innovate UK's iCure grant. Some of the people in the meeting might be familiar with this. This is one of those lucrative grants going out there. It is funded by UKRI. It is an equity-free grant of about £300,000. So a really good grant to go forward to if you want to start your business and give it a kickstart. Chances of success is pretty high. So usually with grants, you have about 5 to 10% success rate. With iCure grant, you have about 30% success rate because it goes through an entire program. That's where Finutest kicked off. That was our entire funding for the first year. Since then, we have raised over 3 million in private funding, which obviously comes from the backing of the technology that we have developed. And we are looking forward to raising another 5 million in the next round. But as of now, we are closing one of our rounds for about 2 million. Said that, it is really good and really helpful if you start with a grant funding, because at that point you have to prove the technology to the government, which is slightly more generous in providing money to you than considered to anyone who's funding it from their own pocket.
Yeah.
And then get the private investors rolling as soon as your technology starts to develop and take more shape.
One of the things that both Hugh and Davies were talking about was that traction piece. And when you go, if you've had a grant and maybe just friends and family chipping in, if you've got, you need to have enough traction. So when you go to the market to get full equity coming in, 2.5, 3 million, you can actually say, and this is where we are, this is the traction we've got. So what traction did you have in place when you started to raise proper equity? What had you proven, or what the NHS fed back to you?
So I think, and a lot of the other speakers must have told you over the different workshops, the main traction that you can get is proving that there is a market for your technology and actually doing the market research properly, making sure that you involve all the competitors that you're fighting against and give a good summary of why your technology will be better than competitors. When you go from, when you grow into the private equity market, the key important feature for your pitch has to be there is a market, so they need to see that their value, their money will double, triple, or will actually be profitable to them. And also put in the competitors. A lot of time, what we fail to do is we don't put competitors in, or we try to put a little bit of a blanket over the top. If you have no competitors, there is no market. If there is market, you are competing against someone. So I think that is the key point when you go and you gain the traction. Again, taking your technology to what we call TRL, technology readiness level, about 2 or 3 before getting to private investors is quite important.
Okay, so that 2 or 3 means you've proven it in the lab, that
Yes,
the
yes.
biology will work. You can take a sample, you've got your assays or whatever, and then out the back it will identify the strain of bacteria or what the infections. I'm an engineer, not a medical person, as is so blatantly obvious. But once you've
Yeah.
proven the biology, it's then engineering it, isn't it? But you've proven that it will actually deliver what it does. And then what have you worked with the NHS on the cost model? So at the moment, for a doctor to take a test, send it off to the pathology lab, get the result, send out the wrong drugs, now they've got to do a different set of drugs. Have you spoken to the NHS about the cost model and what yours will offer?
Yes, yeah. So that was a part of our market research. So seeing how the NHS does this, how the private clinics do this, how the similar thing is done in the US. And actually, after doing all of this, we decided to go to the US because the cost division is very accurate. So you can actually give a proper amount to the investors rather than, when we did the NHS study, everyone was like, how cheap is your test? We don't care about how good it is. Which was quite hurtful, but that's how the current system works. So I think that involvement is very key, and it comes when you go for the market research.
Yeah. Okay. So I think you attended a couple of the workshops, and then you entered the Innovation Challenge competition. How did you find sort of the entry process? To actually submit an entry into it.
Very easy, very straightforward, I would say. I think what really convinced or what really motivated me to enter the challenge was some of the initial workshops that you had. The amount of information was so huge that to be validated by this set of people really said, it was not just confidence for us going out in the market, which again, as I said, winning innovation challenge was also one of the big key. If you have an award-winning company, which almost other companies are these days, it does help going out there. But it is also self-validation that yeah, I do believe in technology, but there are other people who said that go ahead, go for it. So that was a big plus for me.
Yeah. And so I remember it very clearly, you winning and whatnot. So obviously the cash prize would have been useful. But did you then access some of the expertise that was on offer, and which ones did you use?
So yeah, I mean, we are a diagnostic company. So over the whole period, we are looking in terms of millions. So the cash prize wasn't the biggest of the bonus, but the support around that came with winning this, or I would say even for others, participating if you don't win is huge. That is what has taken us up. So we are currently involved with OPD. We also used other supports around the bulk studios and other things that we got mainly for our product development. We are completely associated with Oxford Product Design, and the amount of work that we have done with the collaboration is huge. I would say just in terms of the valuation of the company, we've gone a few folds up because these guys have an expertise and they have the experience of tens of years, and that's what feeds into your current technology. And do not underestimate the power of expertise, I would say. If it comes at a cost, it is because they have put in that much effort to get to that point. What they can achieve in 2-3 months, you will only understand in about 2 to 3 years, because that is the amount of time you will have to go through to understand, the pitfalls, the loopholes, and what not to do. So yeah, having that support around was just brilliant. So Sam, thank you so much for actually giving us that. irrespective
Absolutely.
of, you know, us winning.
Okay. So what? So we've only got a couple of minutes. What does the next 6 months look like for Fenutest, or the next year? What's your sort of medium-term plans now moving forward?
So I'll just give you a quick snapshot of where we were when we won the challenge, where we are now, and the 6 months from them. So when we won the innovation challenge, we were about 5 employees in total. Funding was less than $500,000, and we were kind of perfecting our biological assay, because we are a diagnostic company. In the past 1 year, we have grown up to 13 full-time members. We are opening a new office in Bath. So we are moving from Liverpool. We've been out of the University of Liverpool, and we are moving to Bath. The total funding has increased to over 3 million in total, and we are at a point where we are saying no to funding, then yes, because of, you know, how much equity we are giving away, a position we never thought we would be in. Over the next 6 months, we finally want to translate this biological assay, which we have now perfected, validated with the third party, as I was saying earlier, and really translate into a portable cartridge, which is quite a key point for, you know, companies like ourselves. It's quite pivotal to make that relation between biology and engineering, two of the most difficult things to bring together. Put that together, submit a pre-sub for FDA, raise another 5 million to help us through the FDA regulation, and build a device, as we say, build a shoebox around the technology.
Yeah, fantastic. And I love the idea that you know, your dream is that you have a machine that you sell, but then you have a consumable. So once you've sold the machine and people love it, you have got that ongoing revenue stream with all the cartridges that they then use on an ongoing basis, and that's like your dream ticket with any product, isn't it? It's like
Yeah. I mean,
um,
so the way that we're gonna work is the instrument will be supplied essentially for free on a subscription model of, you know, the number of cartridges they purchase, which is quite standard in the diagnostic terms. But yeah, as you said, it will be a roll-on basis, so very lucrative for, you know, if you want to go into manufacturing, or if we want to sell off the company to someone else.
yeah. Fantastic. Srijan, thank you so much, and thank you, you know, a fantastic advocate for what we as a company with our sponsors Shakespeare and Bulb and the rest of them are trying to do, and that's just help companies move forward. And it sounds like we've hopefully achieved our aim with getting you guys a little bit further down the line. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Sam. It was a pleasure talking to you, and for everyone listening out there, if you need any help, maybe I would be the closest person to where you want to reach in the next couple of years. So please
Yeah.
give me a shout, stick a small PR on there, but feel free to approach and ask any questions. More than happy to help.
Bless you.
Always happy to see new technologies. And thanks, Sam. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Srijan. Thank you very much. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Okay, and our final talk is by Mukesh from Kadak. Are you there, Mukesh?
Yeah, hi Sam.
Yeah, hi there. Yeah, so a bit of a wait, I'm afraid, but I feel we've saved absolutely the best till last. So, and I think you're going to run your own slide deck, aren't you?
I think Joe's got them. If Joe can.
Okay, that's fine.
Brilliant. Well, what the good news is, Sam, that and for everyone listening and watching this presentation, is that I've only got 2 minutes left according to the original timetable.
We've extended that a little bit. So we've had such strong presenters. They've all had so much to say of value that we're a little bit over time. But yeah, the floor is yours, Mukesh. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, well, the good news is that there's not many slides. There's only half a dozen, and really, what I want to do justice to is really put all of this and what the speakers have said earlier together, and what commercialization ultimately means is really how you value your business or IP. Just to put a little bit, next slide, please, Joe. Just to put a little bit of context as to why I'm here. Kodak's, our firm, specializes in advising on deals and transactions, and all that is relevant in a company's stage of progression, if you like, right the way through from valuing the company through to acquisitions or indeed a business exit. And in that regard, what we're looking to do in this presentation is provide our insight into how you maximize that value upon either an exit or indeed how you transfer value to your intellectual property, or enhance your value to your intellectual property. So I'm going to do this presentation a bit back to front. So I'm going to start off with what's entailed in an exit. So next slide, please, Joe. So the disposal process, and I'm not going to go through all of this, really is in 7 phases, I would suggest. And you can see that in this slide, right the way from the initial review and documentation through to the due diligence and final negotiations. Certainly in between, we've covered a bit where there's heads of terms. I think Ed mentioned that in the context of IP, but actually in any deal, you'd have heads of terms as well. Now, with regard to the value, how you maximize value is in the negotiations, that phase 3. But actually, I could have put negotiations in all of those phases, to be honest. It does go through right to the end stage. And, you know, we as mergers and acquisitions advisors will negotiate throughout that process because that's how you effectively maximize value. But to get there, really, if you don't get phases 1 and 2 right, and what you need is really an experienced, I think Srijan mentioned it, you need an experienced expert in all that you do, but particularly in this transaction phase of the life of your company. So the initial review and preparation of the information memorandum, which is a detailed document that you would normally pass over, or the advisor, in our case, we would pass over to the interested buyers. We would tailor that document so that it does show your business in its best light. And what I mean by that is that that information memorandum says everything about your company, but in its best possible light. So that includes everything about your company, ranging from the products and services that you do through to the intangible intellectual property, and your staffing, your employees, your management, your customers and suppliers. Although they may not necessarily be named, they can remain anonymous. But all of that needs to be presented a bit like the PR, I suppose, in its best light. And secondly, in that phase 2, the buyer research again needs to be very, very focused, so as you can maximize your value. The advisor must identify, and the way we do it is we subscribe to various databases, and through our experience and through our network of other advisors and companies that we're in touch with, not only in the UK but globally, we identify and focus in on those that are strategic buyers, or those that are premium price buyers, such that it's not a scattergun approach. It's very much focused on those that we know are serious and have got a track record of acquisitions. In that way, you maximize value. So that's the context of all of this, is that what we're trying to do is achieve that. Now, how you achieve that, if we go on to the next slide.
Just before, so Mukesh, just out of interest, so at the end of phase 3, kind of that negotiations offer, then you move into 4 heads of terms. So heads of terms, everybody kind of understands, okay, we are going to 2p the staff, you know, the branding is going to be this is the headline deal, this is the earn out, whatever.
Yeah.
Depending on, and you say that negotiations sort of really carry on across all 6-7 phases.
Yeah.
So in my head, when you get into due diligence, the buyer's looking way to knock you down all the time, nibble away at the headline numbers. Oh well, you didn't have 10 main clients, you've only got 6, therefore we're going to knock £500,000 off the deal, sort of thing. Is your role also to nudge it back up again, to
Very much
actually
so.
improve on the deal as that process goes through? So it's not just coming down, it can go up as well on as more and more information comes to light.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Sam. Potentially in that phase 5 of due diligence, buyers may try to chip at the price. But if you run a robust process from that phase 1 and 2 in particular, that's why I've concentrated there, then there's very little chance that you're going to be knocked back, even with that due diligence, because as an experienced advisor, you would have done that due diligence in phase 1 in the first place, to ensure that the documents that you produce and all the communications that you have with those buyers is robust, so that they can't knock you down even upon their investigations at the latter stages in phase 5.
Yeah. Okay, I've got loads of questions, but do carry on.
So what we're talking about is value and maximizing value. So if we go on to the next slide, basically the process of valuation. Now, it depends actually what you interpret as valuation. Value can be a calculation, and I'll come on to that in a second, or it's simply a price. And that price is, quite simply put, what a willing buyer is prepared to pay for your business on an arm's length transaction. Now, we as advisors we get asked, what's the value of my company? And we will produce a report. The starting point will always be the numbers, the financial statements, and of course the context around that, and what environment they're in. But it's not as simple as that, because what you look at is also those intangibles that aren't necessarily showing in the financial statements. And that, for example, can be your IP as well. You would normally capitalize your IP and it would show as an intangible asset on the balance sheet. However, and I'll come on to this a bit later, what really enhances that value or monetizes it is actually protecting it. And I think Ed Wright touched on that in his presentation. So all of that is important, but when you come to bare numbers, the inputs, as I've demonstrated on the left-hand side, are all around your cash flows, particularly if you're early stage, and you've started off and you've got a product or IP that is in its early stages, but you want to monetize. So those cash flows and future cash flows are important, as can be as you develop your balance sheet and your net assets, and ultimately your, what we term as EBITDA, your earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization, i.e. your sort of cash flow profits. Now, what you do then, or what we do then, is analyze all of them through various inquiries, which I've touched on, but also making adjustments. So in that information memorandum that I cited earlier, there are adjustments to the bare financial statements, because you will have one-off costs. You will have adjustments to make for savings to a potential purchaser, for example. You will have other effects, synergistic effects, or savings that should be realized when you're valuing a business. And of course, there's multiples that are specific to your sector, your stage of growth, your type of company, and of course what level you're at. You know, if you're a smaller company, you're going to attract a lower multiple than a larger company in your same sector. Then the outputs are, of course, what the company as a whole is worth, but more importantly, what the equity in that company is worth. That's what anyone looking at value will want to understand. And of course, at the early stage, it's that net present value, and you can, you know, very sophisticated buyers of businesses will look at that net present value, but that can be quite judgmental and arbitrary, because there's a lot of guesstimates that you would apply, including the interest rates that you would apply,
Yeah.
as well as those future cash flows.
And I think those net assets, when you said that, you know, the intellectual property can go to the balance sheet as an intangible. I think the accountancy legislation says that really ought to be at the cost that it's cost you to get there. So if you're developing a piece of software, it's your cost of developing the software nearly ready to go. But I think you can actually value it because it goes there because it's going to make money for the company. But you know, to launch Facebook might have cost £1 million, but the actual intangible asset, you know, they sold for billions. So what's the value to the business of that intangible asset? It is a true reflection of what the value is, not the price it cost you to get there, because that doesn't reflect all the investment you've made in people over the years to get them trained up and your knowledge of the market, does it? It's just that might just be the hard cost to get to where it is, but it's actually worth so much more than that.
You're absolutely right, Sam. And again, my colleague Ed Wright did go through this or touched on it, and that cost is just your cost to effectively create it. But the real value, and clearly we want to maximize value, is what its potential value is going forward. And so it's that market value which is very, very important. And it's what it's worth, and this is what we always look at, whether it's selling a company to you know, a PLC, for example, or if you're looking at valuing some intangible asset, which, albeit on the balance sheet, doesn't present a lot of value. It's actually what it's worth going forward.
Yeah.
And that can be, like we've just said, for a whole host of reasons. That market value can be so much more than what you put on the balance sheet. Likewise, it can be based, and again, this potentially is open to manipulation, is those future cash flows and that net present value.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. So this is the key one, really, and on how you maximize the value, and I'll come on to the IP in particular at the end. But as a company, you're really looking at value drivers that you really want to maximize. So if you get all these spokes, blue spokes around that center circle, if you get them right, or if you get the majority of them right, you're really going to be at the top of the tree in terms of value, because these are key areas that anyone looking at your company, potentially an acquirer, or indeed whatever you need that value for funding, for example, or for simply attracting other equity. You need all of these areas to be at a very healthy level. So if I just take each in turn, starting with the strong management. Now that is self-explanatory, really. It is so critical, and you know, the people on this presentation that will have tried to attract funding, the first thing funders look at is your management structure and the people that you've got, and whether you have got strong management. So if you've got that, then you're in a good place, and you should always review that, because it may be that when you started, you may be that management, and you have some friends who've started it, but actually as you grow, you need some experience and some specialists that can take it to the next level, and indeed stand up to either investors or in a deal process. Then
just on the strong management, I think it's also the case, I believe, that you don't want one main person. You know, they need to operate as a team. So if any one person does leave or something happen, the rest of the team can still drive it forward. And the more you spread that risk, the stronger the management. Yes, you need the right skills, but it's also the spread, isn't it?
It is, and it's what I term as covering all the bases. So you have an MD, you have an ops director, you have a finance director, you have a sales director. If you've got and possibly HR, depending on what your company does, if you cover all those bases, then clearly you've got a management structure that is strong and is viewed as strong. With regard to healthy cash flows, again, self-explanatory, but really this goes down to financial performance as well. And so if you've got a business that is strong financially, of course that's going to attract a higher value. So that's what you should strive for, which may mean, depending on your circumstance, reducing your debt levels, although, you know, leveraging can also enhance value. So, you know, it just depends on the circumstances, but also in terms of having that room for growth, that is vital. And if you've got that access to capital, then you're going to be far more attractive. And all this is about being attractive. And that's how you're going to be maximizing value. Likewise, being in a strong industry sector, and you can, depending on how early you got into that stage, or into that sector rather, you can actually potentially dictate how strong that sector is. Now, what I mean by that is, you know, you can go into a very niche sector or create a very niche sector, and it's interesting how Srijan mentioned about having if there's no competitors, there's no market. Well, you can create a market as well, and indeed, if you if you operate in a strong industry sector, you're going to really create significant value. Then associated, I suppose, with intangibles, and IP does help this, are your USPs and your reputation. If you have something that differentiates you and you're innovative, there's something unique about you, you've got really good R&D that you've capitalized, then you're going to create something that is high value. And the brand should support that. So all the speakers today have sort of mentioned around that, but that really does help create value. On another note, having a wide customer and supplier base also is very, very useful to have, rather than having concentration issues with either suppliers or customers, because if your eggs are all in one basket, you know, it's evident that you're at risk or potentially at risk. So having that diversification, and it may not be easy in the early days, because, you know, you have a lucrative contract with someone that forms, you know, perhaps, you know, 40-50% of your total sales, and that gets you going. However, as you develop, you want to dilute the percentages not necessarily dilute the turnover, but dilute the percentages, so that should any of that custom go away, then you're not going to, be at risk. And then modern IT systems, and this mustn't be underestimated, particularly when you've got an innovative company, because having up-to-date IT systems and maintaining them really does enhance value. And what buyers look at is your capex and how, and again, it depends on the credentials of your company, but that capex demonstrates that actually you are growing and developing and you're fit for growth. So that again enhances and helps maximize value.
And I think alongside that, modern IT systems, I think it's probably robust processes. So the IT systems are the vehicle to deliver the process, but you need a robust process for across the business on different aspects: purchasing, sales, delivery, quality control. Alongside the modern IT systems must go the robust processes. So things are repeatable and things don't go as wrong as they could do because that people understand the process and they're delivering to it.
Very much so. And then we move on to protection of IP. Now, it is perhaps relevant to a lot of the people on this webinar, because as, for example, Ed touched on earlier, you can protect IP in various ways. Confidentiality is very, very important, as is perhaps ways of protecting through patents or trademarks and indeed licensing. What we're looking to do is keep or maintain and enhance the value, so not losing that value through leakage, if you like, of IP. And how you really maintain or keep that IP is that you've got to ensure that it's separately identifiable so that you can protect it. You've got to ensure that there is, to create value of it, ensure that there is potential for generating income directly through that IP, and obviously then subsequently profits, i.e. there's some future economic benefits from that IP. Likewise, if you can demonstrate that there's integration within a product of that IP, then it actually demonstrates the practicality of that IP and demonstrates that future economic benefit. The key thing, though, for me is ensuring that you raise some barriers to entry and reduce the threat of competition or substitution of that IP. And that is really vested in how you've developed it and how you've kept that confidential. But that really will allow you to maximize the value of that IP. Sometimes it's not always in your control, particularly if you've got maybe just one member of staff that has created it and then moves on, for example. So they're things to bear in mind.
And we have covered. We did some talks early on. The second workshop was all around people, and the bit about IP and who owns the IP in a company. So be it a director, an employee, or a consultant, or whatever. And I think what you're saying is that if it's a member of staff, then make sure that in the contract that they sign as employment, any IP arising belongs to the company, and sort of those sort of things, isn't it? And having copies of all of those contracts and the content is absolutely essential, isn't it? I mean, if you're looking to sell your business, they need to know that what they're buying is protected, as you say.
Oh yeah, no. Well, I've come across situations where businesses haven't done that, and there's a bit of an issue later on where that actual IP resides or who owns it. So it's best to get that sorted right from the outset, really.
Yeah.
And that's it, really. That's my short series of half a dozen slides.
Yeah, fantastic movie. So so where you sit, so towards, if somebody's got some IP, they've developed it and they're now looking to license, engaging with somebody like yourself allows them to get the best possible representation in the best possible manner to potential buyers, isn't it? And then
Absolutely.
you sit with them and you're the nasty man in the background. They can maintain a relationship with the potential buyers, but you can be sat there behind them a bit like Darth Vader, making sure that you get the maximum value for your client. And all the tricks that the buyers legal people will be doing, you can see straight through that. You can protect them and you can maximize the value. And then do you then work with the legal teams to turn the heads of terms into the final contracts?
Well, we actually do all of that in the first place. So
Okay.
we will also draft up heads of agreement.
Yeah.
So we're chartered accountants. We're qualified chartered accountants, but we actually work with lawyers as well. But normally lawyers come in at the latter part
That's what I
of the
meant. Yeah,
transaction.
to actually write the
Yeah.
contracts.
So yeah. So what we will ensure is that we get involved right from the beginning, Sam, right through to the end. So we're with the client or the company owners the whole journey. And you're absolutely right. They maintain the relationship with the chosen buyer that either we identify, or if they've had an approach, we will then handle it. But we will do the hard talk. We will actually be robust in maximizing the value, because everyone's out to get a good deal, whether it's the buyer or the seller. But actually, that's why I go back to, and Srijan mentioned this as well, having the expertise and the experience in particular. The experience is very important, to know what a potential buyer, for example, could come up with in terms of trying to chip at the price. If you deal with all of that before the latter stages, then that puts you in pole position to maximize the value. But we deal with the buyer all the way through that process.
Yeah, fantastic. Again, it's just you can go into this kind of thing blind, but you're not going to come out of it very well. And the further down the path, it's a case of it's now worth investing more money, absolutely, to keep that best advice on board, be it on the PR side, be it on the getting your website sorted, etc., through to doing a deal and making sure you've got the right people with you as it unfolds, isn't it? So, Mukesh, absolutely fantastic, and thank you very much for coming along this afternoon. I know that you were busy earlier on, so but thank you for joining us. Okay, everybody, I can't believe we're 20 minutes over running, which is my fault as chairman. But to be fair, I felt hopefully everybody felt that was really well worthwhile. Some really useful information. I'd like to thank you for the sort of the mini investment readiness piece, Davis for the how to do the best possible pitch deck, what to look for, his 5 pillars. We had Liam on PR. Telling us how to be cost effective and actually getting the message out there. Dom talking to us about how to launch and understand how to get the maximum value out of your software, your website, your app, and understanding about organic and paid promotion of that. Ed talking about the legals behind contracts and what to look for in the different stages. Fantastic little chat there by Mukesh about valuing your business and the importance of getting the story right as you actually go to market. And then finally, big thank you to Srijan for taking time out of Fenutest to come and talk to us about the Innovation Challenge and how him and his company has developed over the last year. All the 4 workshops that we've run are available online. You can go to the website there, tbat.co.uk, the Innovation Challenge, and all the recordings are there ready to go. please take part in the Innovation Challenge. Please promote it around your networks. Super easy to take part, and a big event on the 11th of October for the 10 finalists to pitch in front of a live audience, and where we will announce the winner. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending. It's been a marathon session. Thank you to Shakespeare's for sponsoring the main Innovation Challenge, and very much to Bulb today for sponsoring this workshop. Thank you to all our speakers. Thank you for turning up, and look forward to hopefully speaking to all of you soon. Cheers now. Bye-bye.